In our headlines on this Tuesday, June 2nd, here in South Korea, the Lee Jae-myung administration vows to focus the second year of its term in office on ensuring tangible transformations to improve the livelihoods of ordinary people. Meanwhile, consumer prices here in South Korea surged 3.1% on-year in May to mark the highest in 26 months, driven by prices of petroleum products as well as prices at the pumps. Also here in Seoul, senior South Korean government officials and their U.S. counterparts begin talks today for follow-up consultations on the security commitments as outlined in their joint fact sheet. President Lee Jae-myung says his second year at the top office that begins later this week will be dedicated to bringing about tangible improvements in livelihoods. Our Yoon Jung-min reports.
The cabinet opened its weekly meeting by paying a silent tribute ahead of Memorial Day this weekend. This week also coincides with the first anniversary of the Lee Jae-myung administration, and the president has hinted at his vision for the second year.
임기 2년 차부터는 지금까지의 정책 성과를 바탕으로 국민 삶의 실질적 변화를 더 크게 만들고
He promised to ensure that the benefits of increased exports can spill over into smaller firms and into helping the vulnerable, while bolstering infrastructure for AI, energy transition, balanced regional growth, and cutting-edge technologies.
반도체뿐 아니라 로봇, 방산 등 여타 첨단 산업 육성에도 박차를 가해서 글로벌 초격차 경제 강국의 문도 활짝 열어가야겠습니다.
He added that South Korea will enhance its role as a responsible global player when it comes to diplomacy and security, and promised to garner more support from the public for his job approval at the end of his term compared to the beginning.
앞으로 4년 동안 국정 속도를 2배로 높이고 정성을 다하면 남은 시간은 비록 4년이지만 8년과 같이 있을 수 있다.
The president reiterated he would employ preemptive measures to tamp down higher prices triggered by the unrest in the Middle East, such as releasing reserve portions of certain items, expanding discounts, and readjusting import quota tariffs. He also pointed out cases where too heavy a debt burden was imposed on the vulnerable, urging for a proper debt resettlement system for them. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Consumer prices here in South Korea have rebounded to the 3% range for the first time in 26 months, driven by prices of petroleum products as well as prices at the pumps. Our economics correspondent Kim Do-yeon has more.
The situation in the Middle East is driving up global oil prices, pushing Korea's consumer inflation past the 3% threshold for the first time in over 2 years. According to the Ministry of Finance and Economy on Tuesday, consumer prices in May rose 3.1% on year. This marks an escalation from the 2.6% growth recorded in April, showing that inflationary pressures are rapidly gaining momentum. Petroleum prices served as the primary driver, surging 24.2% on year. Although retail prices saw a minor dip at the very end of May, the overall monthly average remained high, further compounded by a low base effect from last year.
You have to look at the monthly average. While prices did see a minor dip toward the end of May, inflation figures are calculated on an on-year basis, meaning the low base effect from last year's index was fully reflected this month.
This energy shock quickly cascaded into the service sector. Driven by a strong seasonal demand over May's long weekends and surging fuel surcharges, overseas group travel costs jumped 26.3%, while domestic airfare rose 25.9%. The government noted that aggressive temporary interventions, including product price caps and tariff quotas, managed to shave 0.6 percentage points off headline inflation, which otherwise would have reached 3.7%. However, macro pressures are mounting as the prolonged high exchange rate threatens to feed directly into domestic consumer costs.
A high exchange rate naturally pushes up import prices. When import prices rise, they lead to an increase in producer prices, which can subsequently filter through to broader consumer prices.
Commenting on the latest data, the Bank of Korea noted that consumer inflation is highly likely to remain in the 3% range for the time being, adding that the central bank will maintain a vigilant stance on price stability. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And senior delegates from Seoul and Washington are meeting here in the capital city starting today for follow-up consultations on the security commitments as outlined in their joint fact sheet. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Korea and the United States have launched formal talks on Seoul's push to develop nuclear-powered submarines and civil nuclear cooperation, opening a new phase in the bilateral alliance. The first round of consultations began at Seoul's Foreign Ministry Tuesday morning, with sessions to continue into Wednesday. The highly anticipated talks are aimed at implementing security commitments outlined in a joint fact sheet last year. The bilateral document reflects key understandings reached between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump on Korea's push to build conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines and secure greater rights for uranium enrichment and spent fuel reprocessing.
Starting with this launch meeting, the government will pursue diplomatic efforts to ensure the leaders' security agreements are implemented substantively. Our cooperation and partnership in the nuclear sector will help deepen and expand the alliance.
For Korea, this could unlock new industrial opportunities while strengthening defense capabilities amid North Korea's growing nuclear and missile threats. For the US, Korean investment and expertise could help boost US industrial competence and jobs in areas such as shipbuilding, nuclear supply chains, and defense production. However, under a civil nuclear cooperation agreement with Washington, Korea cannot freely enrich uranium or reprocess spent nuclear fuel without US consent.
Enrichment and reprocessing rights are tied to revising the nuclear cooperation agreement, and this is purely for civilian and commercial purposes. Nuclear-powered submarines, however, involve the military use of nuclear energy. Under U.S. law, that requires a separate agreement, so there'll continue to be close bilateral discussions on how to proceed.
A foreign ministry official said both sides agreed to move directly into working-level negotiations rather than treat the launch meeting as a ceremonial opening session. In fact, the various agenda items are being handled through a single channel for now, bringing together officials from national security, foreign affairs, defense, energy and nuclear agencies. The launch session was co-chaired by First Vice Foreign Minister Park Yun-ju and US Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Alison Hooker, who is leading the US delegation. Posting on X, Hooker reflected on the more than 70 years of the alliance, saying she looked forward to further deepening and modernizing bilateral cooperation and expecting continued progress. On top of the consultations, Hooker is also meeting with Foreign Minister Cho Hyun and other senior officials to discuss broader alliance issues and developments on the Korean Peninsula. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Pragmatic diplomacy based on national priorities. This has been the centerpiece of the Lee Jae-myung administration's foreign policy. And in light of its one-year anniversary at the top office this week, my colleague Kim Bo-kyung covers the progress thus far and the response from pundits.
The Lee Jae-myung administration began its term facing the challenges of dealing with a new U.S. tariff environment and restoring South Korea's credibility after it was damaged by the martial law crisis. The Lee administration pursued a diplomatic strategy centered on pragmatism, grounded in national interests. Since taking office in June, President Lee has devoted considerable effort to summit diplomacy, actively participating in major multilateral events. Starting with the G7 summit in Canada, Lee also attended the ASEAN summit in Malaysia and successfully hosted the APEC summit in Gyeongju. Dealing with U.S. President Donald Trump's America First policies, President Lee held summits with Trump twice in August and October 2025. During the latter summit in Gyeongju, South Korea succeeded in reducing the reciprocal tariffs on Korean exports to the U.S. from 25% to 15%. And pledged approximately $350 billion in investment in the U.S. In return, South Korea also secured U.S. support for the acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines, as well as expanded authority regarding uranium enrichment for nuclear power plants and the reprocessing of spent nuclear fuel, with the agreements documented in the joint fact sheet. Though follow-up discussions regarding agreements have been relatively stalled, due to an unexpected dispute involving Kupang, One expert says that the Yi administration held its own in ties with the U.S.
South Korea has proactively aligned with the U.S. alliance modernization agenda through higher defense spending, OPCON transfer, and greater responsibility for deterring North Korea, earning recognition as a model ally from Defense Secretary Hegseth.
The Yi administration's pragmatic diplomacy was reflected in improved relations with China and Japan. State visits between President Yi and Chinese President Xi Jinping helped improve bilateral ties, while exchanges with Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi strengthened cooperation on energy security and supply chains. In terms of tensions on the Korean peninsula, not much progress has been made, with North Korea doubling down on defining the ties with the South as two hostile states. Another expert says stability is being maintained in its own way and that the government should keep its two-track approach.
Despite the current stalemate in inter-Korean relations, stability has largely been maintained. South Korea should continue to deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats while remaining open to dialogue and cooperation when opportunities arise.
The success of President Yi's pragmatic diplomacy will ultimately be measured by its ability to deliver tangible economic and security benefits. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The U.S. and Iran are sharing conflicting remarks about the fate of their military standoff, with Donald Trump claiming a deal would be sealed over the next week and Tehran contradicting such prospects. Our Park Ko-nu has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump said there could be an agreement with Iran over the next week to extend the ceasefire and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking to ABC News on Monday, Trump said that although it's not a simple deal for both sides, an agreement could be even better than a military victory. Taking to Truth Social, Trump said negotiations with Iran were progressing at a rapid pace. Earlier the same day, Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency reported that communications with the U.S. to end the war had been suspended in response to Israeli attacks in Lebanon. It also said Iran could fully block the Strait of Hormuz and warned that it could activate other fronts, including the Bab al-Mandab Strait at the entrance to the Red Sea, alongside Iranian allies. Tehran's foreign ministry said the U.S. bears direct responsibility for Israel's attacks in Lebanon and warned that a breach of the truce on one front would amount to a violation of the ceasefire on all fronts.
One of the clear reasons for the escalation of the crimes of the Zionist regime in Lebanon in recent days can be nothing other than the undermining of any possible prospect for diplomatic processes to lead to some form of improvement in the situation. And this responsibility again lies with the United States. These U.S. actions are not merely violations of the ceasefire.
Bagai also stressed that the Lebanon ceasefire remains a fundamental condition for any negotiations aimed at ending the conflict. In a separate social media post, Trump said he had helped mediate efforts to halt hostilities between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah group in Lebanon through calls with both sides. He said no troops would be sent to Beirut and that any forces already en route had been turned back. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to cease attacks, but warned that Israel would resume strikes if Hezbollah continued its operations. The Lebanese embassy in Washington also said Hezbollah had accepted a U.S. plan for a mutual cessation of attacks. While tensions remain despite the temporary ceasefire, Israel and Lebanon are scheduled to hold a fourth round of peace talks in Washington through Wednesday under U.S. mediation. Park Ko-nu, Arirang News.
In other news, the U.S. is temporarily offering some tariff relief for foreign-made equipment that consists mostly of American metal. A proclamation signed by Donald Trump this week states foreign machinery containing at least 85% American steel and aluminium by weight will now qualify for a 10% tariff rate. What's more, tariffs on agricultural equipment such as harvesters will go down from 25% to 15%. Industrial equipment, including bulldozers imported from countries with U.S. trade deals, will also see a 15% tariff rate. The revised tariffs will remain in place through 2027. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang believes robotics may serve to tackle South Korea's shrinking workforce. The outlook comes ahead of his visit to Seoul later this week. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has identified robotics as a promising area for future investment in South Korea ahead of his visit to Seoul later this week.
I think that robotics is very important to Korea, and I hope to be able to contribute to robotics in Korea.
Speaking to South Korean reporters in Taipei on Monday, Huang noted that South Korea faces a shrinking workforce despite its strong creativity and innovative capabilities, adding that artificial intelligence and robotics could help the country unlock its full potential. Huang also said he would be willing to bring NVIDIA's flagship AI conference, GTC, to Korea if there is sufficient interest. The event is one of the world's largest gatherings focused on artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. Huang is expected to arrive in Seoul Thursday night and begin a series of meetings Friday with leaders of some of South Korea's largest companies. Industry sources say those expected to participate include SK Group Chairman Choi Tae-won, LG Group Chairman Gu Gang-mo, Naver founder and board chair Lee Hae-jin, and potentially Hyundai Motor Group Executive Chair Chung Hee-sun. The meetings are being closely watched as a possible catalyst for expanded cooperation in artificial intelligence, robotics, and advanced technology development. South Korea is home to several key NVIDIA partners, including memory chip maker SK Hynix, a major supplier of high-bandwidth memory used in AI chips. While Huang declined to confirm who he would meet, he joked that the most important part of his visit would be enjoying Korean food, especially fried chicken and samgyeopsal. His comment has fueled speculation about the potential for another informal gathering similar to last year's widely discussed Ganbu meeting in Seoul's Samsung-dong district, where Huang and the heads of Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor met over fried chicken. The casual get-together drew significant attention for bringing together some of the technology industry's most influential figures outside a formal business setting. This time there is growing speculation over whether the visit could include a so-called samgyeopsal meeting, an informal gathering centered around grilled pork belly, soju, and beer. Observers say a similar meeting during this visit could provide insight into the future direction of AI and robotics partnerships between NVIDIA and Korea's leading technology companies. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Also here in capital Seoul, Korean and African business leaders were at a forum earlier on this Tuesday to explore ways to expand partnership for shared prosperity amid global efforts to ensure sustainable supply chains. Now, this forum comes against the backdrop of the inaugural Korea-Africa Foreign Ministers meeting back on Monday. Foreign Minister Cho Hyun delivered the opening remarks at the business event today, highlighting the importance of broader cooperation. And South Korea saw remarkable performance in the exports of creative goods and in the numbers of inbound visitors last year. In fact, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism says the content industry hit $14.9 billion in exports in 2025. Accordingly, the government plans to boost its financial support for cultural content, including screen productions, by some $480 million. Now, findings for last year also show South Korea played host to over 18.9 million visitors, an all-time high. We are now counting down 13 hours to the opening of polling stations nationwide for the June 3rd local elections. That being said, our political correspondent An Sung-jin was out on the streets of Seoul earlier today to cover the race for the mayor's office here. Do take a look.
With less than 24 hours remaining before voters head to the polls, Seoul mayoral candidates spent Tuesday crisscrossing the city in a final bid to win support. The ruling Democratic Party candidate Chung Won-ho launched his final day campaigning under the slogan, "A New Beginning for Seoul." Focusing on everyday concerns, the DP candidate highlighted policies aimed at easing living costs and improving access to public services. He also promised clear communication with the people as he wrapped up his last day.
At the end, it's about being truthful and focusing on doing my best rather than any other strategy. I guess this is my best strategy.
Chung said voters should support a city government that delivers real change in people's daily lives, as he reaffirmed his signature pledge to create a 30-minute city commute through bus route restructuring and connecting subway and bus networks. He also framed the election as an opportunity to strengthen the Lee Jae-myung administration and accelerate broader changes across Seoul. Both the ruling and main opposition parties point to Seoul as one of the key battlegrounds, as the capital holds a significant amount of swing voters to decide the race. Meanwhile, the main opposition People Power Party's incumbent Mayor Oh Se-hoon kicked off what he called a make-or-break final 24-hour campaign. Throughout the day, Oh criticized the Lee administration's housing policies while emphasizing his commitment to improving transportation and mobility across the city.
It's not about the conservatives or the progressives. I pledge to listen to the citizens and uphold freedom and the law of this country.
Housing affordability, property prices, and stabilizing the cost of living remain central themes of the PPP candidate's campaign. Presenting himself as a seasoned leader and drawing on his experience as mayor, he pledged to tackle challenges in housing, transportation, the economy, and public safety. He also vowed to raise Seoul's global standing and improve the quality of life, economic competitiveness, and the city's overall appeal. As campaigning enters its final hours, the race is set for a closely watched finish, as Seoul residents prepare to decide who will lead the city for the next term. An Song-jin, Arirang News.
And in this next report, we walk you through the upcoming local elections, starting with who can vote and for whom, as well as how. Here's Park Jun-an.
Coming exactly 1 year after the 2025 presidential election, the 9th nationwide local elections will be held across Korea on Wednesday. In most parts of the country, eligible voters aged 18 or older will be handed a total of 7 different colored ballots to elect positions, ranging from provincial governors to local council members. Voters in Sejong City and on Jeju Island, which operate under special administrative systems, will receive just 4 ballots. Some 150,000 foreign residents can vote. To qualify, foreign nationals must have held permanent residency for at least 3 years and be on their local foreigner registry. While early voting was available at any polling station nationwide, voting on election day works a bit differently. Voters must bring a valid ID card or mobile identification app and vote only at their designated polling station based on their resident registration address as of May 12th. Polling stations across the country will be open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. To keep things organized, the voting process is split into 2 rounds. In the first round, voters receive 3 ballots, a white-colored ballot for metropolitan mayor or provincial governor. The light green ballot is to choose the superintendent of education, and the axial ballot is to elect the head of the local district, city, or county. In the second round, voters receive the remaining 4 ballots to select local council members. The light pink and sky gray ballots are used to elect local constituency council members at both the broader provincial and tighter district levels. Lastly, the sky blue and cream ballots are for proportional representation representatives. When voting, you must choose only one candidate or party per ballot. Marking 2 or more names or parties will instantly invalidate your vote.
Votes will be counted immediately once the polls close on June 3rd, ushering in a new 4-year term for local leaders, including the next mayor of Seoul. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
Skies looked quite different today across central and southern regions. Looking ahead to election day tomorrow, temperatures across inland regions are expected to top 30 degrees Celsius. Temperatures will be boosted by a fan effect, which occurs when air warms and dries as it descends mountain ranges. Southeasterly winds from Typhoon Changmi will help trigger this phenomenon. Even so, the air will remain fairly dry, so keeping feels like temperatures slightly lower than the actual temperature. Over waters, our typhoon warning remains in effect for the far eastern offshore waters of the South Sea, while high sea warnings and advisories are in place for other offshore waters of the South Sea and waters around Jeju. Tomorrow will start off mostly sunny nationwide, with cloud cover increasing through the morning. Inland areas of Jeollado and Gyeongsangnam-do provinces can expect brief showers later in the day. As for temperatures, Seoul will start the day at 21 degrees, Chuncheon at 18 degrees, Daegu at 18 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 32 degrees, Daegu at 33 degrees, Gwangju at 30 degrees. After scattered showers develop in parts of the country tomorrow and Thursday, the heat will gradually ease toward the end of the week.
Right, those are the headlines at the hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.